Today we're going to work on painting shadows. What colors do you use, how they create form, and how do you use them to stop what you're painting from feeling like it's just floating on top of the background. It's peak fall here in the States and all of the beautiful yellow and orange trees around. So I decided I was going to go out and try to paint some. And this brings us to a common problem I'm often asked about by my students, which is how do you paint the shadows of something that's yellow? Yellow in particular seems to be quite difficult. And the answer is that we don't try to paint the shadows as if they're just a darker version of the yellow that we use in the lights. It might be quite tempting to just sit back, pick out a black, and try and apply it to our yellow from the lights as if that's going to solve our color problems. But what's really going to solve our color problems is to start to treat our shadows as if they're exactly the same as everything else. They have their own sense of color, their own sense of unique qualities. There are two colors that I observed in these trees. The first one was that the shadow would sometimes turn orange, and other places where the shadow would turn green. So I'm not thinking about this as a dark yellow. I'm thinking about this as a yellow that's turning orange as it's getting darker, or one that's turning green as it's getting darker. You can see that I can have the same color in the light, but the shadow color really gives the object that we're painting its own unique sense of richness and depth. We just get to explore the colors that we're looking at. When we approach it this way, we're gonna find that the colors for the light and the shadow actually end up working together as a team to create something unique and rich, rather than feeling like we're just muddying things up. So we allow ourselves to explore the lights and the shadows individually so that we can enjoy the combination together. Some shadows, like in the second tree I'm painting, are far harder to actually figure out what's going on. That's because the nature of this tree that I'm looking at is far more complicated. It's going from red to yellow into green in a single tree. And so rather than purely focusing on a single light and a single shadow shape, we can use the same knowledge of unique colors for unique situations and trust that process. Trust that it's going to get me to the right place, because it doesn't always feel like it's going to. But something chaotic like this is going to rely on the simplicity of the ground and the sky and the tree beside it in order to give it space. Now, if you're interested in learning to paint with gouache like this, I have a free online workshop called The Roadmap to Painting with Gouache, where I show you how I would learn to paint with gouache if I had to start all over again. This is designed to give you the skills, mindset, and understanding so that you don't have to spend as much time learning to paint with gouache as I did, and to give you the confidence so that you can go anywhere you want and paint the world around you. The link is in the description below. I'll see you over there. So let's come in and talk about what shadows can do for us in general. Right now, I'm going to be painting through what is more or less a pretty generic tree. You're welcome to follow along. But at first, I'm just putting in what I'm seeing as the relative light shapes and colors that I'm seeing. Quite often, this is where people are going to stop. And as they stop, they're going to feel a little dissatisfied with what's going on. They're putting down the color, they're getting the shape right, but in the end, it still feels kind of two-dimensional. And this is where the shadows come in. See, if we're hunting something three-dimensional, if we want to make it feel like it's popping off the page, what it really requires is a relationship between our light and our shadow. So I'm going to come in and put the shadows at the top. One thing you'll find with trees in particular is that if they're leaved, the canopy above is actually going to cast a shadow onto the top of the branches. You can see that up here. So we get this beautiful light and shadow effect from the beginning of shadows being cast by the leaves down onto the tree. But if I can come in and get the light and the shadow, you can already see it starting to pop. But that's not where the problem often stands. You see, if you're painting a subject and it feels like it's just floating on top of the rest of the painting, it's because we haven't grounded our subject well. In its broadest sense, grounding our subject means that we are allowing our subject to actually influence the environment around it. Let's talk about this further while we do our final painting, pulling everything into a big scene. This final painting is going to let us actually see how much work can be done with shadows without really overcomplicating things. So as before, for this demonstration, I'm going to pull in the lights of the trees, and the sky, the grass, and the road. And then we're going to pull our shadows in to see exactly what kind of effect our shadows have on a painting. We're going to go from feeling like we're just dealing with shapes placed on top of each other, floating on top of the scene, into something that feels like everything is integrated and connected. This is what shadows do. One interesting thing to note that I think you may have an inkling for, but may need to be stated out loud anyway, is the question of how light and how dark do you actually make the shadow? And the strength of the shadow, how dark it is less to do with the lightness or darkness of what is casting the shadow, say the trees here, and more to do with the lightness or darkness of the thing that the shadow is being cast upon. So the tree is pretty dark. When it's casting a shadow upon itself, it's going to be a relatively dark shadow. The road at the bottom isn't nearly as dark as the tree is. And so when a shadow is cast upon it, it's visually going to be lighter than the shadow of the tree. So the lightness or the darkness of our shadow is always going to be about how light and how dark is the object that is receiving the shadow. And while we've already talked about each shadow having its own unique sense of color, we want to talk also about the effects of secondary lights bouncing in and affecting the color of the shadow. So the road and the grass closer to us is going to actually be looking up and into the sky. That light from the sky is coming down and is going to be the thing that provides a little extra blue. The blue in the shadow comes from the blue of the sky. But if we're talking about the power of shadows, this is what I want to say. Our main tree in the middle is grounded. Its shadow is being cast on the hill, and that hill is moving downwards and then across with the road. That shadow from the tree connects all of it. And not only is it telling us about the tree itself, the shadow weaves in and out, up and down, around the grass, around the road. So the shadow of the tree doesn't just tell us about the tree, it tells us about the grass and its texture. It tells us about the road and its direction. It wraps around the tree, around the hill, and across the road, and tells us so much information about every single part of this painting. So that we go from a 2D shape-based idea into something that feels really dimensional and beautiful. This is the power of shadows. If you like this, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what is the hardest part of painting shadows for you.